Hi there. My name is Russ Whitchurch. I'm the Adobe Analytics Community Manager. I'm here to welcome you to the Analytics 2018 Summer Release Webinar. We have Eric Matisoff, who's our Data Science and Analytics Evangelist, and Jen Lasser, who's an Analytics Product Manager, here to show us some of the highlights that we have that have recently occurred in Adobe Analytics. So without further ado, I'll have Eric take it away.
Great, thank you, Russ. And as a reminder, this is a listen-only webinar, so if you're out there, then you should be listening, and if you have questions, we certainly want to make it interactive. So go ahead and ask questions in the Q&A chat pod, which you should see within the Adobe Connect interface. Also, we're sending out a recording of this session that you will receive via email to everyone that is registered. So you can look forward to that in your email imminently. So let's kick things off. A few reminders around all the different ways in which you can access content associated with Adobe and Adobe Analytics. One of those ways is leveraging the Adobe Analytics YouTube channel. There's a nice little friendly Adobe Lee short link there, Adobe Lee/Adobe Analytics YouTube. And we have over 100 videos that walk through all sorts of different features and training guides, really valuable place to stay up to date on the latest and greatest. In addition, we have the Experience League, which you can access from experienceleague.adobe.com or Adobe Lee/Experience League with the capital E and capital L there. And it's a really fantastic way to stay on top of all the different features that are being released, interact with the community, connect with experts, and even more, and even submit ideas for products as well. So don't forget to go ahead and check that out. In addition, we have the community forums, which you can access by clicking the question mark within Adobe Analytics or any of the solutions within the Experience Cloud and clicking on over to Community. And there you'll have, as a part of the Experience League, a great way to interact with other customers as well as the product teams and folks at Adobe. If you haven't heard, we are taking the Adobe Analytics team on the road, and that means that we are coming hopefully to a city near you. We've already been to Atlanta and LA and Boston and Columbus, and we also have Chicago, New York, and Dallas, and London, and Sydney, and more on the way. So if you have questions or you're looking to meet up with the Adobe team, definitely check out Adobe Lee/Insider Tour. Keep in mind that those Adobe Lees are they're case sensitive, so be sure to be clear with them. You'll also see a list of all of them that Jen has so graciously put in the Q&A chat pod as well. If you're looking, again, to stay on top of content, and in fact, this is probably the way that you heard about this specific webinar, you can head to our Adobe Analytics Insider newsletter. Again, a nice friendly user URL there, Adobe Lee/Analytics Insider with a capital A and capital I, in order to stay up to date on the latest and greatest in terms of content and webinars and all sorts of fun things. So without further ado, let's jump in. So these are all the different topics we'll be going over during the next 54 minutes and 15 seconds. So we have a whole lot of content to be walking you through. We're going to kick things off by walking you through Attribution IQ, what you can do with it, all the different capabilities, along with the demo. Then we're going to be walking through Advertising Analytics, Server Call Usage, Ad Hoc Project Converter, Power BI Desktop Connector, a bunch of other workspace-related improvements, and an announcement at the end. So thank you all for joining. Let's jump into Attribution IQ. If you haven't heard about Attribution IQ, then this is a great way to stay on top of things. And the way that, and the entire reason that we built Attribution IQ here at Adobe is because there is a problem. The problem is that there's an inability to understand the impact that marketing has on all of the different customer interactions, especially when there are multiple interactions from marketing and advertising, as you can see here. So we could see that we had all these different ways in which customers are interacting with them. We can see paid search, website interactions, display, email click-throughs, etc. And the question is, well, how do we assign credit? How do we know what's working? Well, historically, Adobe Analytics and analytics customers and vendors around the world have been leveraging a relatively simple attribution model. Even if you didn't know what attribution is and you're doing just a little bit of marketing channel analysis, to be honest, you're using attribution. And so in this example, you can see a customer or a consumer that started with paid search, then clicked on an ad, then social media, and finally an email click-through. In a last touch attribution model, that gives 100% of the value of that conversion, that $10, to the last touch marketing channel, email. And that ignores the first three, paid search, display, and social. Similarly, if we were to think about first touch attribution, then the very first marketing channel that consumer interacted with would get 100% of the credit, ignoring the display ads, the email, and the social media as well. So then you may not know this, you also have access to taking advantage of a linear or participation style attribution model where every single marketing channel that was involved in the conversion gets a percentage of that credit. So everyone gets it divided across all of them. So you can see that paid search, email, display, and social all get $250. Now that's a big step forward from first touch and last touch, but it's missing out on the flexibility that marketers need these days to really align the metrics and the channels with an attribution model that makes sense. And so Attribution IQ has expanded that list of attribution models to a full set of 10. And you can see a complete list of them here. And in terms of gaining access to these, I'll be talking through all the different Adobe Analytics SKUs that have access to them in case you're curious, do I have access, don't I have access? So you'll get that in just a second. But we've expanded from first touch, last touch, and linear and participation to include U-shaped, time decay, J-shaped, all of these that are listed here. So lots of different flexibility in terms of how you can analyze your data. So in terms of what works with Attribution IQ, great news. You're not limited to just marketing or advertising specific dimensions. A lot of times we think about attribution beyond just simply marketing. For example, if you're looking to analyze the internal campaign IDs that you have on your own site or your own app, you're able to leverage Attribution IQ in any different EVAR or prop that you're capturing that data in. In fact, this is probably one of those screens that is worth taking a screenshot of if you're a fan of screenshots like I am, in order to stay completely on top of all of the different ways that and dimensions and places that you can leverage Attribution IQ. So a few different real-world successes that we've seen, and you'll see a relatively common theme across all of them. The first is around how a pharmacy retailer was able to recognize not only the most recent push notification from their mobile app that was driving conversion, but how the different intermediate and helpers and initial push notifications were eventually helping to drive that conversion as well. And then similarly, if you take a look at each of the different items that we have here, from campaigns to internal promotions, marketing channels, and product and segment attribution, you really get a feel for the fact that we're looking well beyond just the most recent value that drove the conversion. Instead, you're able to see all the different touch points that supported it. So with that, I'd actually like to switch on over to my browser so that I can go ahead and show you what this looks like within Analysis Workspace. So let me share my screen here. And when I first pull it up, you'll see that I've already opened probably the most boring Analysis Workspace project ever. And so rather than keep things boring, let's spice things up a little bit. And so to do that, we can switch on over to our panels area here on the left. And previously, you had blank panel, you had freeform, and segment comparison. Attribution IQ adds this attribution panel, where we just simply make a few different decisions, and we're very easily and quickly able to compare and contrast all of those 10 different attribution models side by side. So the first thing that we'll do is decide what metric and dimension we're actually going to analyze here. And so I'm actually going to pull in the marketing channel dimension. Now this is actually a new dimension made available to you since the release of Attribution IQ. And the reason for it is to simply avoid any confusion around the concept of last touch channel or first touch channel, which are the initial marketing channel dimensions that were released. Now, as you can see, I still have access to it, but it would be a little confusing if I were to apply a first touch Attribution IQ model to the last touch channel here in the panel. So instead, I highly recommend beginning to migrate over to using only the marketing channel dimension. Now, we can also pull in a metric. For example, here I'm going to drag and drop online revenue as my success metric. I have a decision to make around my look back window. In fact, if I have more questions on that, we can see what exactly that means. And this is something that we've built everywhere within Attribution IQ to really give you all the details you need to understand what you're analyzing. Because honestly, this is complicated stuff. And so the look back window, we have two different choices. You can focus on just the single visit and what the different channels were that were driven within that visit, or we can take a look at the entirety of the visitor's history based on the reporting window that is set within our panel. So I'm going to leave it as the visitor reporting window here. Then finally, I have to make a decision around what models I'm going to be comparing and contrasting. So by default, we have the originals of last touch, first touch, and linear. And once again, if I need additional information, I can hover over the question marks here as well. Now, what if I also want to compare perhaps J-curve and inverse J, and then finally, I can also pull in time decay. Now, time decay is one where we're leveraging a half-life concept where every week we go backwards from the conversion, the value decreases by 50%. It's sort of like when we were all in biology in high school and learning about half-life there. It's the same concept, but finally we get to use that in our daily lives. So we can change that based on minute, hour, day, week, month, quarter, and year. I'm going to leave it as the default for week and click apply. So once I click build, then we're going to see that comparison where we have a bunch of different pre-built visualizations that are helping you compare and contrast within each of those values for the dimension that I selected, marketing channel, and comparing and contrasting each of the different attribution models that I selected. So I can see email is associated based on first touch, last touch, linear, J-curve, inverse J, and time decay, and the same thing for each of my different marketing channel values. Now below, I've got a live linked table so I can quickly continue my analysis using this table instead of this graph above. Now there's a few things that we also can adjust right here within a table. And these capabilities are literally any table that you have within Analysis Workspace. I have the option to just simply right-click. It wouldn't be an insider presentation by me if I didn't talk about right-clicking. It's my favorite thing. We can right-click here on this metric and go on down, and if we say, you know what, I don't want to analyze last touch anymore, I'm going to switch on over to a different model, I can actually make that on the fly and say, you know what, I'm going to take a look at same touch instead and see how that then compares to each of my different other attribution models here as well. Now similarly, I can right-click again and I can do a comparison of my attribution model. So I can compare linear to perhaps maybe I'm most interested in a custom attribution model. And you'll see, just like time decay, I have a decision to make around my custom attribution model. And by default, we're looking at a starter, player, and closer style of custom attribution. So that the way that this works is we're giving 40% of attribution to the very first touch, 40% to the very last touch, and then all of the touches in the middle, they split up the remaining 20%. Now again, there's lots of really good information here to learn more about how this actually works. In fact, if I were to decrease this down to 10%, the tool is smart enough to be able to find the least common denominator across these three, and I don't actually have to worry about adding this to 45 and 45. We just do that math for you. So I can go ahead and click apply. When I do that, since I did a comparison, I'm actually taking a look at the comparison of linear versus my custom starter player closer, and then we've added that column, but we've also added an additional one here where I can see side by side with conditional formatting applied the percent change differences between linear and custom as well. So some really powerful ways in which we're enabling attribution right here in the interface, not only in the panel, but also in tables. Now, rounding out the remainder of the Attribution IQ panel, you can see that we've pre-built a channel overlap for you that compares and contrasts each of the different top marketing channels associated with your metric. As per the usual, within a Venn diagram, you can right-click and create a segment from that selection also. If we head on over to the right, then we can see each of the different total number of touches that are aligned with your visitors in terms of how many each of those visitors have had based on any channel that you're analyzing. Next, we have a scatter chart that's comparing your first touch visitors to online revenue, and then comparing that to same touch here on the left, so you can really get a feel for how they're interacting together. And then the last piece of Attribution IQ panel at the bottom is this channel flow, where you can see at the visitor-based level, we can see how users are traversing from one channel to the next channel and to the next channel, etc. And per the usual, just like any flow, you have the opportunity to right-click and create segments or trend and all of that fun stuff. Now, we talked through the Attribution IQ panel. We talked through the ability to right-click on a free-form table to create attribution model comparisons and modify them on the fly. There's one last place that Attribution IQ becomes available, and that's when you create a brand new calculated metric. And so if I were to just simply drag and drop, let's keep it simple, a boring metric here like online revenue that we're capturing, I have the option to use a non-default attribution model just simply by clicking the gear within that calculated metric. So I can click this checkbox, and you'll see a very familiar modal that pops up, where once again, I make a selection of any of these different modals. Perhaps I thought, based on my analysis, that J-curve aligns really well within this use case. So I can click apply, and I'll call this my J-curve online revenue metric. And then when I hit save, now that automatically is going to be the default value associated with my calculated metric. You can even see that listed here in terms of how it's defined. So let me switch on back to the slides, because I think I walked through everything that we wanted to show within Analysis Workspace. And I want to give you a feel for other capabilities and some frequently asked questions that we've been getting that are associated with Attribution IQ. So let me pull those up in just a second. So you can see here which Adobe Analytics SKUs are entitled to use Attribution IQ. As I mentioned, I'm going to mention this. The Attribution IQ capabilities are all available in all the currently sold Adobe Analytics SKUs, which includes Foundation, Select, Prime, and Ultimate. And it also includes Premium Complete and Premium Attribution as well. So all 6 of those different SKUs have access to Attribution IQ. In fact, if you're curious, you may not be that familiar with what your specific analytics SKU is and whether you're on one of the current ones or a legacy SKU. And so you can find out simply by clicking on Admin and scrolling on down to Company Settings. And then finally on the right, you'll see View Feature Access Levels, where you'll get a feel for every single feature within Adobe Analytics and whether or not you have access to it. In fact, you can see I've highlighted on the left here a list of all 4 of the Attribution IQ related features. And so one thing to keep in mind is that for those of you that are on some of those legacy Adobe Analytics SKUs, you will still have access to the base available models of first touch, last touch, linear, and participation. And so you will be able to leverage those in calculated metrics. You just won't have those in free-form metrics or panels. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Another frequently asked question that we get is around what happens when an EVAR has a specific allocation and expiration set to it in the admin console. So for example, an EVARs have the ability for linear or first touch or last touch settings. And the way that the tool works today automatically is that the EVAR settings are followed until a non-default attribution model is applied. So that means that I'd have to check that box to say, enable a non-default attribution model, and only then are those admin console-based EVAR allocation settings overridden. Next up, and I already talked about this briefly in the demo, what happens to the first touch channel and last touch channel dimensions within Workspace? So we've already created this marketing channel dimension to help avoid confusion. We didn't want to delete first touch and last touch channel because I'm sure you already have plenty of saved projects in Workspace historically where you didn't want them to just simply be removed. So the recommendation is to start migrating over to this new marketing channel. However, the old ones will continue to work as expected. So this is a fun one. So we've been getting this question a lot during the insider tour is like, so you're telling me that props are actually more have more worth than they used to? And that is actually true. You can apply attribution models to a prop. You have to be cognizant of the fact of when you're actually setting those props, when in an experience, when in your tags, when in your mobile app, etc. Because there's a chance that you will see an unspecified, a little bit more that are associated with props because of the timing that they're set as well as persistence. Regarding look-back windows, and I mentioned this briefly during the demo, is that we automatically have access to standard look-back windows of visit, which is the duration of a visit, and visitor that is based on the reporting window within the project. The follow-up question that we're always getting is, can I apply a custom look-back window to those attribution models? And at the moment, we only support visit and visitor. However, both are configurable based on the reporting date range or a custom visit within a virtual report suite. So keep in mind that you do have flexibility there to adjust that look-back window. So here's another good question around virtual report suites that are using context-aware sessions by enabling report time processing so that the visit maybe expires after 5 minutes instead of 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, etc. And the short answer is that attribution models can be used in base report suites, they can be used in virtual report suites, and they can be used in virtual report suites that do use report time processing. So they're available everywhere. So the next question that we're getting is around algorithmic and statistically or data-driven attribution models. They're not yet currently available within Attribution IQ, but it is something that we're working on. And then another question around where Attribution IQ becomes available. And today, Attribution IQ, those new models are only available within Analysis Workspace rather than those other features that you see within the question. So I mentioned taking a screenshot of that earlier slide, and basically this is the inverse of that slide, in that we're trying to provide you with all of the different metrics and or dimensions that are not necessarily supported by Attribution IQ. So the big ones are going to be list bars and A for T and unique visitors and visits and occurrences. So keep an eye on those when thinking about attribution modeling. Some of them, it just simply doesn't make any sense to be applying attribution to. Others it may, but they just simply aren't supported. And so with that, I'd like to hand things on over to Jen Lasser, the rock star from Utah/Chicago. Jen, show me what you got.
Thanks, Eric, for the warm welcome. So the next feature we're going to talk about is Advertising Analytics. And this is all about integrating paid search engine data into Analysis Workspace. So Advertising Analytics allows you to surface your paid search data side by side with analytics data in Analysis Workspace. This integration is available to Select, Prime, and Ultimate customers that do not own AMO. I stress that point because the AMO customers have long had this integration available. This one, you do not have to have AMO at all. purchased to take advantage of this integration, even though we're using that product under the hood. The integration requires no new implementation. This is something you can easily turn on in the admin console. I'll show you that in just a little bit. The integration works across 3 different engines, Google, Bing, and Yahoo, and you can set up each of your accounts through the admin console, which we'll take a look at in just a second. The metrics that are integrated through the integration include cost, impressions, clicks, average position, and average quality score. These metrics are integrated at the summary level, so you might be having some questions about if they work with Attribution IQ, given that we just covered that a second ago. The answer is no. The metrics are tied in at the summary level, which means they're not associated to a visitor ID, which is necessary to do attribution across. So keep that in mind. You can look at these metrics side by side with analytics data when you're pulling by a trended dimension like month or week, but you cannot apply attribution models to them or use them in breakdowns with other analytics dimensions. In addition to the 5 metrics, we also pass over a handful of classifications of the ID that is sent over. These classifications are things like keyword, match type, all the way up to search engine, all the way down to keyword, anything in between. So those dimensions can work with any of the 5 metrics. They also work with the instances metric that gets passed in with that dimension. So keep that in mind. Not only are the new dimensions and metrics available in Analysis Workspace, but we've also created a standard search engine template that's available to you when you click on the new project start screen in Workspace. So let me show you a little bit about how to set this up and what the resulting data and template look like in Workspace. So from the setup perspective, it's fairly simple. There's no implementation needed. You just need to go to the admin console and select Advertising Analytics, and you'll get a screen like this where you can set up a new advertising account. You type in your credentials for each search engine, and we'll start to pass over the data shortly thereafter. In Analysis Workspace, you'll once this integration is set up, you'll start seeing a list of dimensions like you see here on the screen. AMO ID is the base ID that is powering the integration. Despite the name, again, you do not need to own AMO to take advantage of this. The rest of the dimensions are classifications of that ID, again, all the way from search engines at the highest down to keywords at the lowest level. We also created the standard template of search engines to show you all of this data. One thing I do want to call out, this is paid search data only. This does not include natural search, so do keep that in mind. This will show you the trends of those 5 key metrics as well as various levels of breakdowns to help with your paid search engine analysis. So a couple key questions that we wanted to highlight for advertising analytics. The first is what SKUs is this available to? And the answer is Select, Prime, and Ultimate Analytics SKUs. What search data do I get with this integration? So you will get paid search data points of impressions, clicks, cost, average quality score, and average position. You'll also get metadata dimensions passed over from search engine down to keyword and things in between like match type, platform, and account. What level is the search engine metric data integrated at? So I touched on this earlier, but it's a very important point that I wanted to reaffirm with an FAQ. So the 5 metrics are passed over at a summary level, which means they cannot be broken down by analytics dimensions, things like device type or browser. That also means they cannot be used with Attribution IQ because of the level at which they're tied into our data set. There is one exception, the AMO ID instances metric that corresponds to the dimension that powers the integration is available to be broken down by analytics dimensions. It is roughly the same as the clicks metric that gets sent over. Does advertising analytics cost anything extra? So no, outside of the having the right SKU, the advertising analytics integration doesn't incur any extra costs. It also doesn't incur any server call costs because we treat it as a special data source type. So with that, I will turn it back over to Eric to talk about our server call usage feature.
Great. Thank you, Jen. So next up, we want to talk through a little bit around some questions that we've been getting for years. All the time, we've had administrators of Adobe Analytics and stakeholders asking to stay a little more on top of how they're trending when it comes to server calls and their contract. So because of all of those requests, we've created this brand new server call reporting capability, where right in the interface, just simply by accessing the admin console, you're able to see how you're trending when it comes to the number of server calls that you have, primary and or secondary server calls that are flowing into Adobe Analytics for your company, as well as breaking them out on the individual report suite by report suite level. Now, something that you may not be aware of is that we are building some proactive notifications into the tool as well, and we have that currently planned for September of this year, so it'll be out in just a month. So let me give you a quick walkthrough of what this actually looks like. So here in the server calls usage little dashboard here, this report, you can get a feel for the total number of overall primary server calls on the top and secondary server calls on the bottom. And the two different graphs are showing you what the current period usage are, the previous period usage, so last year, as well as the usage limit. So that's how many server calls are included within your contract. Now, the other tab within server calls usage gives you a feel and gives you the ability to break down each of these different sets of server calls, secondary, primary, mobile, etc., by report suite by report suite. So you just simply select your report suite and then choose to download that, and you'll get the ability to either choose the current usage period, which will be defined there in the modal, or just simply a custom range, and you can click download and you'll have that information. Now, as I mentioned, in September, we're planning to release this capability associated with the alerts, so that once again, you're proactively informed once you hit that 90% mark or 75% mark associated with the usage of your server calls and your contract. So hopefully that'll be another useful capability for you. So some questions that we're getting a bunch of is around where the billing and account activity tabs went within the admin console. So the server call usage feature is meant to replace both of those under admin. Are the usage and commitment details specific to the login company? And the simple answer to that is no. The usage and commitment details are governed by your entire Adobe Analytics contract in case you have multiple login companies, as some of our bigger customers may have. Does this include usage and commitment details for video for customers that are using, for example, Heartbeat, for example? So not currently. We're working on ways to include them as part of a future release associated with this feature. And as an analytics admin, we're getting the question around, why don't I see a server call usage link under admin? You can choose which of your login companies displays the link under admin. So it may be a different login company, which is why you don't see it. If you don't see it and you can't find it, then definitely contact customer care and we'll make sure it's enabled nice and quickly. Jen, you want to walk us through the ad hoc analysis project converter?
Yes, I do, Eric. Thank you. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is the ad hoc analysis project converter. The project converter allows you to seamlessly copy all of your ad hoc analysis projects over to Analysis Workspace with the click of a button. So we do all the heavy lifting in translating that project definition to Workspace. And we wanted to release this feature to help you make a more seamless transition to Workspace without losing any of the project work that you've built up in ad hoc analysis over the last few years. So in ad hoc analysis, the way to convert projects is available in twofold. The first is under the File menu. You can convert projects to Workspace from there. And the second is from the icons in the top bar. There's an export icon that we've added. You can convert one or many projects at a time. So you can convert the project you're currently in or select many projects and hit convert. We will pop a conversion summary that shows you if each project landed safely in Analysis Workspace or if there were any issues. If there were any issues, we'll provide an error code that will help us troubleshoot that with you if you contact customer care. We've seen that our customers have been having great success with this and being able to successfully move over projects no matter how complex they may be in ad hoc analysis. So you may be wondering, okay, well, I've converted it. How do I find it in Analysis Workspace? When you land in the browser UI on the Workspace landing page, there will be a couple ways you can find your projects. The first is by the name. So the name will match what you see in ad hoc analysis. The second way is we've applied a tag to the converted project called ad hoc analysis project. So a couple different ways that you can better understand which projects have come over from ad hoc. When you open up the project in Analysis Workspace, it should look exactly like you saw in ad hoc analysis, but the visualization layer in Workspace is much improved. The interactivity is much improved, and some of the layout is a little different. Ad hoc uses left to right tabs. Workspace uses top to bottom panels. So there's a little bit of a workflow change and some terminology to get used to in Workspace. But other than that, your data and everything should be the same. If there were any differences in how we handle things in ad hoc versus Analysis Workspace or any unsupported features, we noted that with descriptions so that you know exactly what happened during the conversion process. So a few questions that come up with this. Are changes to a project in ad hoc carried over to a converted Workspace project? So the answer is no. Once you've converted a project to Workspace, it is a copy in Workspace. We will not keep the projects in step. So if you make changes in ad hoc, they won't be mirrored over to the Workspace copy. You do, however, have the opportunity to convert your project again, and you can convert as many times as you'd like. So what happens to ad hoc project schedules? Schedules are not ported over through the conversion process. So what we recommend is converting the project, opening it in Workspace and getting familiar with how everything converted over. And once you feel comfortable with that project, you can go ahead and cancel your ad hoc schedule and then reset it up in Workspace scheduling. One other question that I don't have a slide for, but we'll touch on later, is what's happening to ad hoc? So if you have that question, please be sure to stick around to the end of the session to hear the announcement that we want to share. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Eric to talk us through our Power BI desktop connector.
All right. So for those of you that are using Microsoft Power BI, it's a really fantastic business intelligence tool that Microsoft has had out for a while. You may not know this, but if you have an Office 365 account, you already have access to take advantage of some of these capabilities within Power BI, so give it a try. I did not mean for that to rhyme, but it did, so we're all winners because of it. So let's talk a little bit around how we're already integrating Power BI with Adobe Analytics. As you can see on this slide, this is actually the third integration, the third piece of the integration with Adobe Analytics that we already have. The first was taking advantage of what we call a content pack, where you simply logged into Power BI with your Adobe Analytics username and password, and we had a number of different content packs that had pre-built visualization that would get updated nightly so that you could analyze your data over in Power BI. It was limited in that you weren't able to integrate that data with other data sources. However, the second integration did allow for that, in that the way that it was enabled was leveraging Report Builder within Excel and pushing that data from Report Builder up into Power BI, so then you could then mash it up within Power BI Desktop as well as others. And then finally, this third integration is taking advantage of the ability to query Adobe Analytics directly in Microsoft Power BI using the Adobe Analytics Reporting API. And so that allows you to do a number of different things. First of all, you can, as I mentioned, mix and mesh and merge your data from Adobe Analytics with any other sources of data that you have in Power BI. It also helps you bring Adobe Analytics data to a broader set of users within your enterprise, those that maybe feel a little daunted by the Analysis Workspace interface or Adobe Analytics in general, or just simply are more familiar with the Power BI interface. And then finally, it also helps, Power BI is great because it enables a self-service data access on any device. If you haven't used it yet, the Power BI mobile app is actually really slick. It does a really nice job in terms of turning your responsive reports into something that can be digested on a smaller screen. So definitely highly recommend checking it out. In terms of getting it set up, first all you need to do within Power BI Desktop is click Get Data, which you'll see in the home ribbon there within Power BI, and then do a search for Adobe and you'll see Adobe Analytics, where you can then log in and with your Adobe Analytics username and password. And then it's just a matter of selecting the measures and dimensions that you want to pull into Power BI, again, based on the data within a report suite. And then finally, start having some fun, create some visualizations. If you've never used Power BI before, it's going to feel a little awkward compared to Analysis Workspace. But once you kind of get over that initial hump, I've actually found it to be quite powerful and quite useful, and you can really do some cool things with filtering and flexibility in terms of your visualizations and colors and things like that. So some really powerful things that you can do within Power BI. So what entitlements do you need from Microsoft in order to leverage Power BI? You can explore all the Adobe Analytics integrations with Power BI without actually buying a license to Power BI. As I mentioned, just simply having that Office login will get you in there. The time that you will need to upgrade or license Power BI is for some of the pro or premium capabilities associated with sharing dashboards and reports to other users within your organization. So a good question that we've been getting is around what are some of the differences between Power BI and Analysis Workspace, and since, in the end, they're both analysis and dashboarding tools. So we'll start on the left. Most of the folks on this session probably are already pretty familiar with Analysis Workspace. It provides a rich set of segmentation features that allow analysts to deep dive into customer behavior, segmentation and flow and fallout, calculated metrics, etc. Also within Workspace, you have the ability for curation and self-service experience for business users who need to be able to access their digital experience data. What Power BI brings along with it is opening the door for broader enterprise reporting to executives and stakeholders and the folks in the C-suite that maybe are a little less comfortable logging into Analysis Workspace and pulling data there. Keep in mind that if those personas within your company already have access to Power BI, then they're already comfortable using it and perhaps maybe already know their username and password. And I've found that the less usernames and passwords I can bog down the C-suite with, the better. Next up, as I mentioned, the mobile reporting experience on any device within Power BI is really nice. It's really slick. It works really well. And also Power BI allows Adobe Analytics data to be incorporated and merged with other business reporting coming from CRM or all sorts of other data connectors that Microsoft has built. In fact, you can even push data in using SharePoint or OneDrive or an Excel sheet just to manually continue your merging and mixing and matching of data. If you're looking to learn more about the desktop connector, we created this nice friendly little Adobe /Power BI, where if you click through there, you'll get the Microsoft Focus notes on how to set up Adobe Analytics as a data source within the Power BI desktop tool. And Jen, why don't you walk us through some other enhancements associated with Workspace?
Sounds good. So we're going to go through a handful of things that we've done to improve Analysis Workspace, as well as intelligent alerts, support a user ticket submission, and a new media collection API that was released. So starting with Analysis Workspace improvements, in May, we introduced the concept of dynamic columns. So in the past, you were able to bring in dimensions as columns in addition to dimensions as rows to create a cross-tab analysis. In the past, dimension columns would behave statically, meaning the values would not change over time. This presented some confusion because if you drop in a dimension typically as rows, you would expect those items to be dynamic, meaning the top 5 could change over time. So we wanted to mirror this behavior to columns. Now if you drop a dimension in as a column, it will behave dynamically. So if you change the calendar or the calendar naturally turns, the columns will update and be dynamic. A good use case for this is if you bring in the day dimension as a column header, the days will roll if the calendar turns. You still have the ability to make items static if you don't want this behavior to happen by either right-clicking those columns and saying make static, or simply bringing over static items from the left rail by just selecting the dimension items you care about and adding them into your table. So the next update I wanted to share is in-product tips and Analysis Workspace. So this is something we released in May as well. This is available on the bottom right of your Workspace screen and any of the other builders. We've put in tips that should show about weekly. We wanted to highlight a way to highlight lesser-known features, some tips that other customers are finding useful, as well as highlight the newly released features that we've pushed out each month so that you're aware of the changes that are going into Workspace. Each of the tips has a Learn More link that takes you to our YouTube channel with videos on each of the tips, as well as the releases that we're pushing out each month. If you don't find the tips helpful, you can dismiss it for the week and wait for a new one to come back the following week, or you can permanently disable them under the Help menu. Some other improvements that we've made in Workspace are to the left rail. This is something we rolled out last month. So we've kind of given it a new look and feel. We wanted it to be more consistent with the styling used in our freeform tables so that you have a more consistent experience in Workspace. We also added inline plus symbols next to metrics and segments and date ranges so that you know when you're looking in that part of the rail that you can add new calculated metrics, segments, or ranges. Also, when you highlight different values in the left rail, you'll have options to do different actions, like tag those items, so that is also available to you. And finally, in kind of restyling this a bit, we removed the redundant icons that you would have seen in the former Workspace UI. That caused some concerns, though, when you search and you have a mixed results list where you see dimensions and metrics and segments all kind of jumbled together. So there were some accessibility concerns raised by you guys, our customers, so we will actually be reintroducing icons for mixed search result lists in our release on Thursday. So, you know, with any of the features that we release, we always love hearing the feedback that you have, and we take it into consideration. So please don't stop giving that feedback, and we'll do our best to continue iterating on not only this feature but other ones as well to make sure they're meeting your needs. So the next update I want to share, this one's actually going out on Thursday, and this is drop zone guides. The drop zone guides are going to be subtle contextual guides that are helping you to make sure you're about to take the action you want to take. For example, when you drag over a dimension into a freeform table and you drop it on top of an existing dimension, we will show you the words replace or break down depending on what you're about to do. This will hopefully help you have to undo less and be more confident in what you're about to drag and drop. In addition to blue guides, we also will be introducing yellow drop zone guides as well that will just give you a subtle indication that what you're about to do will lead to invalid results. We're not going to prevent you from taking that action because we don't want to get in the way of your building process, but we will just let you know that you will get invalid if you don't make a change after you make that drop. The reasons invalid happens are twofold. The first is if you overlap your metrics, meaning you stack two metrics in a column, or you use a metric in rows and columns together. That's invalid. And the second reason you might get a warning is if you try to bring in a dimension into a column that doesn't already have a metric on top of it. So it'll just let you know that you'll need to add a metric before you'll get any data. So hoping these drop zone guides are helpful for not only brand new users, but also seasoned users to feel more confident in your building process. So for Analysis Workspace, we often get the question about how you, our customers, can track the usage of your users in Adobe Analytics. In our admin logs usage and access area, you can get very detailed information on usage across our browser tools. For Workspace, we've long tracked things like project creation, updates, shares, etc. And we recently added Project Viewed as well. Project Viewed is going to be the best indicator of if somebody's opened up the Workspace project that you shared with them. All of this data can be downloaded out of the UI and manipulated in Excel to create a nice summarized view. And we've put together a YouTube video on that if you're interested in taking that analysis further. We do also know that the logs aren't the best way to look at this type of data. So on our roadmap is a plan to create a more friendly usage UI where you can see Workspace usage at a more detailed level and in a more concise way than the logs. So keep an eye out for that in the future. So in Intelligent Alerts, we've made one small update, and it's the ability to set your criteria based on anomalies that are above or below the expected threshold. So use case for this is if you set an alert for conversion rate, and you only want to be alerted if conversion rate has dropped and not when it increases. So just wanted to let you guys know that those options are now available. We've also added in the ability to contact customer care directly from the UI. So under the help icon on the top right, you can now submit a supported user ticket. This will pop open a modal where you can provide steps to recreate the issue you've had, and we'll also collect some basic information based on the context of your issue, so things like your username and your report suite, so that the process to resolving issues is much smoother. We're hoping that this cuts down significantly on your issue resolution time. Last update I wanted to share before we get into our final announcement is the new media collection API. This new API is another method for media data collection, and it's a complement to our existing media SDK. The API extends video measurement to all current and future devices. A couple examples are gaming consoles and VR devices. It's going to allow you to measure your streaming audiences more holistically to get a more accurate perspective on your customer reach. So that kind of wraps up all of the released features that we wanted to go over with you guys, things that have gone out from May until July. But one final important announcement that we wanted to share revolves around ad hoc analysis. So if you're an ad hoc analysis user and you saw a converter earlier, you probably are already asking the question, what is the future of ad hoc analysis? So on August 6th, so this past, or like 2 days ago, Monday, we announced the intention to end-of-life ad hoc analysis. We're announcing the intention to do this far in advance of when we intend to end access. We don't have a firm date for that yet, but we are targeting Q3 of 2019. We wanted to give you guys a full heads up to allow you to make a smooth and gradual transition over to Analysis Workspace. In between now and when we end access, we will be focused on closing a few gaps between some important workflows between the tools. So just know that we're committed to making sure that you can do everything, all the important workflows that you have in ad hoc, we're making sure you're able to do that in Analysis Workspace as well. We'll be holding a webinar tentatively planned for September 6th on this topic. So if you are an ad hoc user and want to learn more about this announcement and how to transition, please do sign up for that webinar. And finally, we've put together a lot of collateral and material on this announcement, training resources, workflow videos so that you know how to do something that you've long done in ad hoc in Workspace, and a lot of other great material on the microsite here. It's adobe.ly/discoverworkspace. So with that, we will be wrapping up the webinar. We wanted to share a few more helpful links that cover a lot of the material we talked about today and goes even beyond that with tips for Adobe Analytics as a whole, Analysis Workspace specifically, and the new user persona as well. So if you do have any new users at your organization, this is a great place to send them to help them get up and running in Analysis Workspace. So to wrap up, we covered a lot of great topics today, from Attribution IQ to the Power BI desktop connector, as well as our intention to end-of-life ad hoc analysis, which we announced earlier in the week. Appreciate everyone's time. And with that, I will turn it back over to Russ.
Thanks, everyone, for joining our webinar today. We really appreciate it. Please do take a look at the polls and vote and submit your learnings and topics and feedback. We read every single one that's submitted, so we really appreciate it. Thanks for joining, and keep on analyzing. See you in Analysis Workspace. Bye, everyone.